The transmission arrived at 0300 hours, Earth Standard Time. Every screen on every vessel in the Terran Defense Fleet flickered simultaneously, not from a malfunction, but from the sheer overwhelming power of the signal being broadcast across 17 star systems. Admiral James Kowalski stood on the bridge of the TDS unyielding, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips, reading the words scrolling across the main display. All species. Galactic Council Emergency Session. Mandatory attendance. Failure to comply constitutes an act of aggression. James set his mug down slowly. "Sir," said Lieutenant Marcus Webb, his young voice tight with controlled panic, "every major species has already confirmed attendance. The Vorkai. The Selenari. The Drath Collective. Even the hive minds of Sector 9. He paused. "All of them, sir." James stared at the message for a long moment. Then he clasped his hands behind his back and said two words that would echo through galactic history for the next 10,000 years. "Tell them no." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council sat at the gravitational center of the Nexus Station, a structure so massive it had its own weather systems inside. 2,000 delegates from 400 species filled tiered seats that curved upward like the inside of a cathedral built for gods. High Arbiter Voskelian of the Selenari called the session to order with a resonant strike of his ceremonial staff. The issue on the agenda was existential. The Krothvul, a predatory armada from beyond the galactic rim, had arrived. They had destroyed 3 colony worlds already. They had sent a single message to the Galactic Council: surrender your chosen representative for execution, or we burn everything. The math was brutal and simple. 1 life. Or billions. Every species had sent their ambassador. Every species had bowed their heads and begun the quiet, shameful calculation of who could be sacrificed. Every species except one. "Humanity's seat remains empty," announced the protocol droid, its mechanical voice carrying an unmistakable tremor. "Admiral James Kowalski of the Terran Defense Fleet has declined the summons. He has declined to provide a reason." The chamber went absolutely silent. Ambassador Rylk of the Vorkai, a creature with 6 arms and the battle history of 1,000 wars, slowly turned his compound eyes toward Earth's empty seat. His translator buzzed softly as he whispered, "They declined." While the galaxy debated their absence, humanity was busy. 37 Terran warships had quietly slipped out of their designated patrol zones 6 hours before the summons had even been issued. Admiral Kowalski had read the intercepted Krothvul communications 3 days earlier, communications that the Council's own intelligence apparatus had somehow missed, or perhaps chosen to ignore. He hadn't told the Council. He hadn't asked for permission. Colonel Rebecca Hartley, commanding officer of the TDS Iron Gospel, pulled her ship alongside the unyielding and opened a private channel. "James, the Council is losing its mind. Voskelian is threatening sanctions. The Drath Collective is calling it an act of..." "Let them talk," James said calmly. He was studying a star map. "Where are we on trajectory confirmation?" "Krothvul main fleet is exactly where your projections said they'd be. Sitting just outside the debris field of Kepler's crossing, cloaked. Waiting for the Council to hand someone over." Rebecca paused. "James. There are 900 ships out there." "I know. We have 37. "I know that too." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "Then, what are you thinking?" James looked up from his map. His expression was calm, almost gentle, the face of a man who had already made every terrible calculation and arrived somewhere on the other side of fear. "I'm thinking," he said, "that the Krothvul made one very serious mistake. They studied every species in this galaxy before they came here. They learned our languages, our politics, our weaknesses." He paused. "But they clearly didn't study us long enough. Because any species that had studied humanity properly would know one fundamental truth." "Which is?" Rebecca asked. "We don't negotiate with things that threaten our family." The Krothvol never saw it coming. Not because humanity's technology was superior, it wasn't, not entirely. Not because the 37 ships were more powerful than 900, they weren't, not individually. They never saw it coming because the Krothvol had built their entire strategy around a single assumption, that humanity, like every other species, would flinch. Instead, Admiral Kowalski did something that military strategists across the galaxy would spend centuries analyzing. He split his 37 ships into 4 groups and attacked from 4 directions simultaneously, not to win a direct engagement, but to create chaos inside the cloaking field. The Krothvol vessels, packed tightly together in the debris field, couldn't fire without hitting each other. Couldn't maneuver without collision. Their greatest strength, their numbers, became their deadliest liability in the tight geography Kowalski had chosen specifically for this reason. The battle lasted 41 minutes. When it was over, the Krothvol Armada flagship was broadcasting a single repeating signal. Surrender. The council chamber received the battle report in complete, breathless silence. High Arbiter Voskelian read the data twice. Then a third time. His 6-fingered hands were trembling slightly, not from age, but from something far more primal. Something that his species had not felt in recorded history. Awe. Ambassador Rylk stood up without being recognized. Protocol, in that moment, simply ceased to matter. Against 900. 41 minutes, added the protocol droid, somewhat unnecessarily. The chamber remained frozen. 2,000 delegates from 400 species, not one of them capable of forming a sentence. It was a junior Selenari aide, barely old enough for her ceremonial robes, who finally broke the silence. Her voice was barely above a whisper, filled with something halfway between wonder and terror. Why didn't they tell us? Why didn't they ask for help? Why didn't they speak to us? The answer came not from any delegate, but from a single message that arrived on every screen in the chamber simultaneously. A message from Admiral James Kowalski, transmitted from the bridge of the TDS Unyielding, now sitting amidst the wreckage of the Krothvol fleet. It read: There was nothing to discuss. You were busy deciding who to sacrifice. We were busy making sure nobody had to be. Kowalski, TDS Unyielding. P.S. The Krothvol request formal surrender terms. Someone from your council may want to handle the paperwork. That part's not really our department. Epilogue: What the galaxy learned. Historians would later write that the Battle of Kepler's Crossing was not humanity's greatest military achievement. It was their greatest statement. Every species in the known galaxy had faced the Krothvol ultimatum and begun calculating acceptable losses. Humanity alone had looked at the same equation and simply refused to accept its premise. They had not debated. They had not deliberated. They had not asked for permission or offered explanations or waited for consensus. They had acted. Quietly, completely, and without hesitation. High Arbiter Voskelian would later write in his memoirs that the most frightening thing about humanity was never their aggression, never their stubbornness, never their strange biological resilience. It was their silence before action. Every other species, when faced with a crisis, filled the void with words. With politics, with negotiation, with the elaborate architecture of civilized debate. Humans went quiet. And the galaxy, having now witnessed what that silence preceded, would never hear it without a cold shiver running through their very souls. Humanity had declined to speak. And the galaxy would spend 1,000 years being grateful that they had.